Welcome back to the Daily Doyle. Guys, I am livid this morning. Oh my gosh, absolutely so frustrated. And this will tie into our daily devotional, which I will get to. So let's just start with, I would certainly consider myself a victim's advocate, being a victim myself. And as I, learn things, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have known this sooner. So then I, of course, want to make sure that I share that with other victims, kind of thing. Whew. So long story short, my abuse occurred when I was like 12 years old. So talking about like the statute of limitations for taking action. Now when my abuse happened and the story came forward, he was criminally charged and spent time in prison. And for me, life went on, blah, blah, blah. You can, catch my story in the other video that I had shared on that. I never realized that a civil suit could also be brought. And I did become aware of that a couple years ago. Now so my parents knew that because I've had this conversation with them. And they're like, what good would it have done? And I'm kind of glad that they didn't take that action, because now that leaves the door open, that now that I am older and have a voice, I am able to take that action. Ooh. But here's the thing with the statute of limitations. I'm in Pennsylvania. That time frame has passed. I think it is currently, it might be like age 32. And I didn't become aware of this until like age 35. But anyway, and it wouldn't have been any time before now. I don't think it would have been the right time. I wouldn't have been at the right place of healing in my own personal journey to be like, okay, I'm ready to do this. And that's the thing, like there shouldn't be these timelines, because for some victims they don't come forward until years later. And like in my case, yes, the story was brought forward right when it happened, but it took many, many, many years for me to fully process the extent of the harm that it had done, and for me to heal from that. I spent many years completely unhealed and a disaster. But now I'm finally at that point, but due to that statute of limitations, that time frame has passed. So there's a House bill, it's House Bill in Pennsylvania 963. And what they are proposing, they're proposing to do away with the statute of limitations for any new cases. But they're also trying to offer a 2-year window. So anyone that has missed that, they are able to bring a civil case to court within that 2-year window. So November 2019, this bill started through the process, and it has to pass. I'm not an expert on this in any way, but it has to pass through in 2 consecutive sessions and then be voted on. So it's kind of a lengthy process. And I've already spoken to an attorney that specializes in this. Like, I am ready, just waiting for that green light in this bill to pass. And I hadn't heard anything in a while, but it had already passed through the first session. I'm waiting for it to pass through the second so it could be voted on. So I did a search last night just to check, hey, has there been any updates? They dropped the ball. And it says, Department of State apologizes for its failure to properly advertise proposed constitutional amendment HB 963. So basically what had happened, it said and this came out in February, and it's now August, but again, like I wasn't like stalking this bill. I was just kind of waiting for it to pass so I could take action. So in February, it said the Department of State today apologized for failing to advertise a proposed constitutional amendment first passed by the legislature in November 2019. HB 963, which could have been considered this month for its second consideration. So back in February of this year, it would have been up for that second round to pass through that second time. Under the state constitution, after first passage, the wording of a proposed constitutional amendment must be advertised in 2 newspapers in every county in each of the 3 months before the next general election at which members of the General Assembly are elected. This advertising did not occur as required in the lead up to the 2020 general election. The proposed constitutional amendment would extend retroactively the timeline victims have to file civil action against their abusers. The department offers a sincere apology to the victims impacted by this oversight and the delay that will be caused. While the department will take every step possible to expedite efforts to move this initiative forward, the failure to advertise the proposed constitutional amendment means the process to amend the Constitution must now start from the beginning. So it must pass in 2 consecutive sessions and must be advertised after each passage, and then after which the proposal is put to the voters in a statewide referendum. So it passed in the first session, and then they didn't advertise it like they were supposed to, so it couldn't go up in the second session, and it has to pass in 2 consecutive sessions, so now it has to start all over. Like, I really felt like everything was lining up in terms of my healing, and yes, I'm coming off as angry. But here's the thing, and this might be one of those things where, like, do as I say, not as I do. I'm not sure, still having these conversations with God. But I feel like anger for me is a good thing, because I spent so many years like dead inside and not feeling anything and being like, okay, whatever, this happened, wasn't a big deal. And then after, beginning that healing journey and seeing like how destructive and how many issues it caused without me even realizing, like, yeah, I'm angry. I feel like I'm allowed to be. And I know a lot of times, like, counselors will say, like, it's never a good idea to like face your, like, they're not going to put the victim and the abuser like in the same room. But I'm finally to that point in my, healing journey, like, I'm ready. Like, I want to take this to court. I want to like let this person know, like, this is what you did. This is the amount of destruction that you caused. And I was ready for that. And now to see that this bill has to start over from the beginning, like, that pushes it back 2 years, and I'm just like, oh. Like, for me, I kind of see like taking this step as like that would be hopefully a big chapter of closure for me. Like, let's put an end to this, and close that door. And now to have to extend that out 2 years. Not happy at all. So, it's kind of interesting because before I even like open this book, I'm like, oh, I'm sure God will have something to say about this in the devotional. And this is the devotional book that I read out of yesterday. And so it's the first one I picked up and just went to the very next day. And of course. So again, this is Daily Hope for Hurting Hearts. The verse is John 16:33. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. We may wish we could dodge all the unpleasantness of life on a broken planet, but none of us gets a pass on suffering. Some will suffer more than others. Some will face calamity and heartache. We know that. But we will all experience tragedy in this life, and most of us will know what it means to have a loved one die unexpectedly. When you see something like that happen in the life of another believer, when you see a Christian suffering through one of these heartbreaking seasons of life and glorifying God through it all, it gives you hope. You say to yourself, she made it through, so I can too. He's giving God glory through the worst of it, so I do that as well. God can be glorified through the suffering of a Christian, and he can use it to display his power to a lost world. Unbelievers could look at some of our lives and say, you Christians talk about your faith, but your lives are pretty good, all things considered. But what do they say when they see us go through a time of setbacks, injustice, or suffering, and still maintain a sweet spirit and a strong faith? Some of these people outside of the faith might very well say, how do they do that? Could this faith of theirs be genuine? Could there really be something to it? The trials and hardships give the believer a platform from which they can give witness to their faith in Christ. Why? Because they are actually living it out in the real world. Think of Corrie ten Boom, who lost her father and sister in a Nazi concentration camp, but miraculously survived herself. She spent the rest of her life telling people that there is no pit so deep that God is not deeper still. And she was able to forgive those who had perpetrated these evils on her family and friends. You just have to pay attention to a woman like that, because she faced such horrendous circumstances in her life and honored God through it all. Whew. Yeah, that hit me like a train. I know that God is still on his throne and he is still in absolute control. I don't know why this had to happen. Like, of all bills that they could have, like, dropped the ball on, like, why did it have to be this one? But God is in control. I know he loves me, and his timing and grace is perfect. So I would just encourage you today to remember the same thing. No matter what suffering we are facing, injustice or setbacks, God is still on the throne, and he is good. So thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.